Hi, I'm Julie Schaefer, the host and founder of the Finding Love Summit. I'm also a psychologist and relationship coach. Today, I have with me Karlita Nabours-Palermo. I recently had the privilege of meeting Karlita face to face, and all I have to say is, wow, what a pleasure. She is knowledgeable, authentic, and fun. Karlita teaches and empowers motivated, strong women to heal their emotional wounds and create lives of love and joy. This is such important work because motivated, strong women often suffer tremendously because they don't conform. And it can be such a struggle to heal these wounds. Welcome, Karlita. Why don't we start out by having you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Julie. It's good to see you here again. I love Julie. Julie's an amazing woman. You're all very lucky to be tuning into her show. I am Karlita Nabours-Palermo, and I help women to basically create a strong foundation of self-love as the basis of everything else that they desire in their lives, from healthy partnerships to career dreams. Because I see self-love from my work with people over many years as like the basis of everything that's missing or empowering somebody forward into what they want to create. It's kind of a the way I see self-love is like a catch-all term for many things. It's self-worth, it's feeling good enough, it's how we treat ourselves on a day-to-day basis. It's an entire relationship with ourselves. So it's entirely about how we relate to our own limiting beliefs, our own vision, our own purpose, our own value in the world. It's all of those things in my philosophy come under the catch-all of self-love.
That's great. One of the things that I've run into when I talk to people about this is they often think I'm trying to get them to be selfish or narcissistic or, um, sort of arrogant when I talk about things that relate to self-love. Can you talk about what the difference is?
The cultural notion. Right, yeah. That unfortunate notion rife in a culture lacking in authentic self-love. Of course, nobody knows what self-love is in our culture because in our culture, we're all about either pandering to everybody else's wants and needs and trying to be everything to everyone, or we see these negative examples of being selfish in certain ways, or we don't know that it actually isn't selfish for people to do things for themselves. But one of the most common phrases I hear people throwing around these days is that you've got to inflate your own life vest first and get your own oxygen tank first and that stuff, where you can't do anything for anybody else. That's true, but it's true not just because you need the energy. People, our bodies are incredible things that can run on nothing. Like, we can feed them drugs and crap food and all kinds of stuff for a long, long time, and we don't die because we're incredibly resilient. It's not just for survival that we do that. It's so that we can have healthy relationships. Because if I lack self-love, and I come to you, Julie, wanting to be friends with you, you'll feel that. You'll feel on an energetic level, because the way I'm showing up is wanting something from you, is trying to get something from you. I give you the burden of my emotions for not feeling worthy. And then you feel this pressure to like try and make me feel better or take care of me. It's creating a burden for other people when I do not fill my own cup first. And people feel that, and it either repels them or it creates these unhealthy codependent dynamics. Like, it's not just for survival. It's actually so that we can have healthy relationships. It's for everyone to take care of ourselves first. So that's part of self-love, is learning how to do emotional management. So how do I handle my own feelings? How do I become responsible for my own feelings, in a way that lets me engage with people without putting all that on them or projecting stuff onto them. I mean, there's so many things about self-love that are countercultural, but actually in the best interest of everyone.
I hear a lot out online and social media about being authentic. And I feel like we get that wrong too. So often I hear people say they sort of like dump all of their emotions out and then say, oh, well, I was just being authentic. Or if I say something to somebody that sounds agreeable, but I don't agree, then I feel like I'm not being authentic to myself. And I get this sense that people feel like they have to defend their emotional lives with this term of authenticity. I
And
mean, how do you incorporate authenticity into self-love? And what does it mean to be authentic?
another example that came to mind when you said that was I'll see people in the online dating profiles. They'll say, like, oh, I'm brutally honest, or don't hate me if I tell you the truth, even if it hurts your feelings. People think that just barfing everything that thought comes through your mind is authenticity. That's not authenticity. Authenticity in it, authentic authenticity is really about it's about authentic to who you really are and what's true in your soul. It's not about putting your wounded projections on other people. It's not about unexamined garbage. It's about, okay, am I speaking from this like wounded part of me that thinks that you're hurting me and is seeing things through the lenses of my negative beliefs about the world that I am unconscious of? Is that authentic? Well, maybe it's authentic to my wounded self, but nobody's wounded self is actually anybody you want to relate to. That's something I'm responsible for. So when I'm standing in responsibility for those parts of me and for my own feelings, and I have tuned in and really listened for what's true for me in a way that's responsible for who I am and what I feel. And it's not about, it doesn't have that emotional charge sometimes. You can tell that you're in a wounded space or in a triggered space when there's a lot of charge to it. When I'm it's, which is not to say, a blanket statement. Sometimes anger is a very useful thing to say. A boundary needs to be set here. It's not just a trigger. It's like, it's actually coming up for a good reason. But you know that it's authentic when there's not a negative story being made up about you or me in the meantime. It's just, Julie, I don't have, I can't meet you for coffee today. It's authentic. It's not just like, well, you're a bitch and I'm not gonna go out. Like, and you hurt me and you let me down last time. And it's not, that's me putting a bunch of stuff about a story onto you. When there's no story to it, that's one clue. It gets much more nuanced than that. And that's something I think a lot of people have to be trained into, really, is to learning into that different. There's a lot of nuance in this whole how we relate to ourselves and each other. But that's, does that make sense as a starter answer?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It does make sense. And I like how you talk about the nuance of relating to people because everybody's different, right? And
Yeah,
sometimes you accidentally trip over other people's emotional wounds.
totally.
I think it's important to know your own emotional wounds, the things that kind of get you riled up or emotionally dysregulated. And those are often these wounds that we get either from our childhood or from relationships that didn't go well as an adult.
Mhm.
And how do you identify? How do you talk with your clients about identifying when they've run into a wound and exploring that?
Well, very often, as I mentioned, it will come with the sense of a story to it.
Mhm.
It will come with that kind of charge of like, there's an emotional piece here, and sometimes we get to sort that out with other people. So one thing I teach people a process founded by Dr. Margaret Paul called inner bonding. So that's one of the things that I do with clients, and it's basically a process of self inquiry where we're going in and we separate ourselves into these roles where we examine, okay, what is the wounded self saying right now? There's a story here. I'm having a feeling, but there's a story with it. Some part of me is making this other, thing that happened into a story, and I need to sort out what is that story for. So we take the time to actually inquire about what I'm believing, what I'm feeling, and actually just giving it space to sort out what we're thinking and feeling. And then we bring that also in relationships with people, because I think that this is a piece that's really edgy for a lot of us, is to actually come to another person and vulnerably say, ooh, I'm feeling this thing and I'm not sure if it's real, but I'm feeling this and it's hard for me to sort out right now what is actually going on. So like a misunderstanding with a friend the other day, I had a friend who made a strange comment on something I'd posted online, and I texted her and I was like, what was that all about? Just like I wasn't sure about it, but it's, even that was something I wouldn't have done years ago. But and also she and I have such a relationship now that I can just bring it out like that instead of being like, oh, I'm interpreting it this to me in this way or whatever, like we just have a more open relationship because we've been through conflict already. But to actually address these things with other people in a way that isn't accusing of them and is just saying, I'm not really sure what to make of what just happened here. And part of me felt stung, but I didn't know, like if that was personal or like what's going on with you here or something, but we
Yeah.
we do bring it up with other people and within ourselves. So we negotiate these things, in taking responsibility for ourselves, and we can negotiate them in the relationships where they occur.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that we often can identify that we have a thing going on within us
Mhm.
if we're telling ourselves the story, and often we're emotionally triggered at the same time.
And that's
And
usually the case. That's
yeah,
usually the case. And so we've done quite a lot of self-work. Um, it takes quite a lot of attention and practice to begin to just say, "Oh, I'm experiencing a helplessness over what this person said, and the fact that I can't control all of the events of the universe." The fact that I am not in control of the universe is just like a difficult thing for us to handle in a lot of ways. People do things, people say things, like there's stuff happening in the world that we don't have control over. And that desire to create control drives a lot of what's happening into the realm of story and things like
yeah.
that, to give us a sense I can do something about it.
Oh yeah, that's such an important point, because so many people get anxious about what they can't control, and they
Yeah.
fill in the gaps of their knowledge with some assumptions that that's the story, right? And it's often, I tell people all the time, we are horrible at knowing what other people are thinking and predicting the future.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
we'll
we're really,
project all kinds of things into
yeah,
that. We will assume that we know what other people are thinking, and we'll know what's gonna happen, and, like, we don't enter into a space of surrender about anything, and so we enter into our space of control instead, and, like, "How am I going to maneuver this in in
yeah,
the direction that I want it to go in?" And it's so automatic. It's a hair trigger thing that we flip into.
yeah, yeah. This whole I'm supposed to, or you're supposed to, or I should, or you should, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's when it really helps to bring in a connection to divine guidance, because we really are all part of. I mean, it's just this is scientifically backed. Like we're having this experience as if we were separate people, but really we are all deeply connected, and we are all in a field of deep connection.
Mhm.
And your level of consciousness affects what's possible in the field of relationships around you, but also just to realize, like when we can recognize that. I mean, think of all the times something has happened in your life that you could not have finagled. It came to you as a miracle. Like, well, so you're worrying if we'll ever have a partner ever again and all this kind of stuff. And then then it comes, then it happens, or something happens that we could not have predicted, we could not have maneuvered. But yet, all the way up until that moment, we are trying to finagle it. We're trying to maneuver it. So just to recognize that we're actually part of this field, and this a field that's alive with consciousness, and that we can interact with that and put our intentions into it, and surrender the control thing to a more collaborative attitude with the universe is very powerful in my experience.
How do you work with people around that? How kind of getting more connected to that, or more aware of that aspect of our lives?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize what the pattern is that's not surrendering to that. So that's why the inquiry into like what the story is very important beforehand,
Mhm.
so that we can actually recognize what, like talking about control. You see my video about Betty the secretary who
Oh,
thinks she's the CEO.
yeah,
I
I
have a
love
wounded
that.
part.
I love it. It's a
Yeah,
great video. Yeah.
I have a wounded part that I call Betty the secretary who thinks she's the CEO, because her role is really just to kind of get things done and take notes and manage a to-do list and things like that. But she thinks that she's the one in control and has to run the show. And when I, as a person who used to always let Betty run my show, and a lot of perfectionistic driven people do, and people who are like, doing things in the world will often have a Betty in there. Betty would never allow me to sleep. There's always work to be done. Can't relax if there's anything left on the to-do list. Can't, always trying to control, and will not let me actually relax. And doesn't think that anything good can happen if I don't let her relax. So, well, first I had to become aware of her. So recognizing her as a pattern that comes up in me a hair trigger will come up as a pattern in me, especially if I take on a new project or something like that, or I'm creating a new event for my audience or something. Like, she can come in, and it might take me like a day or so to recognize that that's happened. I'll notice because I'm really tired, because another wounded part comes in as a rebel to that. And, but I've recognized the patterns now. So I know that that's there. So just doing that work of beginning to see, like, oh, I do this thing and I have believed it. I've thought that that was my only reality, and to begin to open to the fact that there might be another reality that I could engage besides the one that my little mortal self has taken on for itself. That there might be
Right.
another way of moving through the universe than that. So that's one piece of it. And then whenever you've decided to do that, really just like having a practice of engaging with that in all kinds of different ways. You can do that through prayer and intention, and just the chosen act of surrender, which is really edgy for a lot of us, but just choosing to surrender and saying, like, this situation is a little bit beyond my hands. I know that, like, especially if people are looking for partners and things like that is not something you can control. Like,
Right.
you can do all kinds of things that are in your control, but just making another person, a certain other person, show up in your life is not something that you can time. It's not something that we have control over. So sitting back and saying, I am handing this over to you. We are collaborating in this. I trust that this is like coming into my field. You can visualize the divine however you like, or as an abstraction or whatever works for you. But I encourage people to find something that they connect with, and that whenever they sit and actually choose to engage with it, it's something that can create a state change in them immediately. So, for example, I happen to visualize a spirit guide that I've been connected with for many years, and whenever I'm, consciously choosing to connect with that divinity, this being in my mind is just a representative of something that's far beyond my ken. But I envision us sitting on one of the cliffs of the Oregon coast, and I feel her presence. And I've done this enough that I actually just feel a state change come over me. I breathe her presence into me, and it's just like all of a sudden I have all the access to all my own wisdom, or the wisdom of the universe, or I don't know where it comes from. But it surprises me. It definitely surprises me sometimes, and it's very much counter to my habits sometimes. But that's also a practice of beginning to, like, and have the willingness to surrender to what comes through that way. But there's a lot of ways to connect with it and to work with that.
Well, I like what you've done because you kind of personalize both your patterns and this sense of the divine in a way that you can relate to it. And you
Yes.
allow it to affect you. And then in the case of Betty, you kind of put her in her place,
Yeah.
but she has a role. It's
Yeah.
not let's not get rid of Betty, but let's figure out how she helps you.
Right.
And I really like that.
It's really about balance. I don't remember if I talked about this in the Betty video, but in some traditions, we talk about like the shadow and the light. And until we bring the shadow into the light, it's running us from behind in a way that doesn't work. But it's actually our own energy. And when we integrate it, we can use it to feel things forward, because that people can be like, oh, but I love my Betty. Betty has accomplished so many things. Betty got me all these fancy degrees, and Betty got me, all these things started in my life that other people wouldn't necessarily just do on a Saturday afternoon. but
Right.
but but we can recognize, like, that has its place. But when that part has taken over from fear, from compulsion, from feeling like it's unsupported in the world, from feeling like we're not good enough yet, therefore Betty is going to drive us to, like, study more and not actually get started doing the career of our dreams, because we think we're still not good enough yet and we have to get enough 11 more degrees before we'll ever be good enough to do the thing. That's when we're operating from the shadow side of it. Whereas in the light, it's like, oh, I've got all this ambition. How handy. Like, that's going to let me get all the things done that I want to get done in my life and live my life to the fullest and stuff. But we're doing it in a conscious rather than a compulsive way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That, in the when you're a strong, motivated person, I think you often run into times where you bump up against other people's expectations of you. And if you're the kind of person who has a lot of ambition, you often don't conform well. to
Yeah,
what's going on around you.
true.
And it creates these wounds, these insecurities that we develop over time. And those insecurities, Betty, or maybe if it's another pattern, an audience member might have a whole different name or a way to describe this pattern for themselves, but that's the pattern that sort of takes over, and is coming from a place of insecurity.
Yes.
So you
And that's
stay.
like it's the opposite of our authentic self in a way. It's not really authentically us because it's something that's an automatic. It's come on automatic and it's taken over. And even though it's not true to what my inner being really needs right now, or who I really am and what I really want, what would best serve my vision, even
Mhm.
what would best serve my vision for partnership, what would best serve my vision for my dream career, whatever it might be. Betty or whatever that part is thinks that it has to keep us safe. It has to keep us controlled. It controlled. The wounded self is trying to protect us. It means well. So it's edgy for people to begin to let go of that because that is what we have known as safety. So for some people who are very type A to actually take some rest and relax more and not be, doing stuff all the time and to like build in some space to like relax is good, to put limits on things, to learn to let go and not be so anxious, even emotionally, not just in activity levels, but how to like actually release anxiety and release the emotions that come up, because the emotions are a big piece of what stops us as well. It's not just the actions that we fall into, but the habits of fear and depression and things like that, and like how do we actually handle that as well? That's an important piece of it.
So fear and depression and anxiety can be habits.
They're habits. Yeah.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
I've learned that because I'm an Enneagram 4 for any Enneagram geeks out there. I am totally a 4. And people were surprised by that because they're like, "There's you seem so happy." I'm like, "I am." But I also have the full spectrum. And like there are times when like yeah, the Enneagram is such a useful tool to me and my clients because it helps me really home in on what is the blind spot. I call it the blind spot that's so big that it's your sky. It's like the entire backdrop of the life you have created because you're so sold on this one particular false belief that you have built your life around it. And so it's an incredibly useful tool. Probably not scientifically backed, not too concerned about that. I have a lot of like you might call it, I'm a nurse practitioner too, and I call it like my clinical evidence. Like my clinical evidence is that like when I land somebody's type and like nail that, they're like, oh, it's like they finally got beneath the layer of their own assumptions, their deepest assumptions, and to see like how that's been operating on automatic for them. But yeah, these feelings, the one of the pains and the gifts of my type in the Enneagram system is like wallowing in difficult feelings. So I'm deeply familiar with the habitual nature of feelings. So I mean, and we all have these feelings, but just my particular type is incredibly aware of the pain of them all the time. And so unless we learn to really check out what's happening there, those can be habits as well. And those habits that are running the show, it's not just, like I said, it's not just the actions, but like when those habits are running the show, we can be afraid to challenge the emotions. We can be afraid to challenge the assumptions beneath the emotions because that is our comfortable discomfort zone. It's our uncomfortable comfort zone. That's all. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's our incredibly uncomfortable, painful, limiting comfort zone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We hate being there, but we cling to it as if our life
Yeah.
depends on it.
Yes, if you ask somebody to like challenge their status quo and give up the habitual perfectionistic behavior or people pleasing or whatever it might be, oh my God. I mean, it's really threatening. It can be, so that's why it's helpful to like have support through that
Yeah.
or processes that you like are very familiar with to help yourself through that. Because otherwise those feelings will stop people from doing anything they ever want. It'll stop you from connecting with a partner. It'll stop you from creating your dream career or whatever it is that you're desiring to do.
Yeah, yeah, we totally need somebody to help us through that. That even goes back to if you have a friendship or a partner and they've upset you and you go back to them and say, "Hey, I need to check this out."
Mhm.
because we need that other person there to help put some boundaries around these feelings that are sparking all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about taking things personally. I think that's a pattern that people do a lot. And
Yes.
and it's very confusing because when we're in a relationship and somebody upsets us, it's personal, and yet it's not. So how do you work with people around that particular dynamic?
That one again primarily comes back to looking at, okay, I somebody this is really a game changer for me when I had been avoiding dating online. I had been treating all of dating as a big trigger for years. And then somebody brought it to my attention that that's what I was doing. And I was like, oh, I see this. I still have this belief in my unlovability that's operating here.
Hmm.
It cannot handle what I experience as either the pain of rejection, regardless of whether I was actually even interested in the person, like rejection, it's saying something about me that I can't handle to see up close again because it's too painful to have my unworthiness reflected back at me because that's the mirror I'm holding up for myself. That's the mirror of meaning that I'm holding up. If I just don't feel it with somebody and they don't feel it with me, or the pain of like, hurting somebody else's feelings or managing their feelings if I wasn't interested in them and they were interested in me. Like that was very triggering to me as well. There was so much wounded story behind the whole dating process. So it was a game changer when I decided I'm going to go in with this active practice of not taking anything personally. When somebody's not interested in me, it's not because I suck. It's not because I'm unlovable. It's just because we're not a match. Just like I probably recognized about them in most cases. It's
Right.
just not a match. It's not about making the other person bad or wrong or unlovable or whatever. It's just that it's not what one of us or both of us are looking for. Okay, fair enough. But we've made this story in making it personal that says, "Oh, that didn't work out because I'll never find love, because I am doomed, because I am unworthy, because I don't matter. Nobody ever sees me, nobody ever loves me. If they got to know me better, they wouldn't really love me." Whatever the story is, when we're taking things personally, we have an opportunity to say, "Oh, what is my story here? What am I making this mean that it doesn't can't actually mean?" Because in truth, we're all actually divine beings made of love and inherently worthy of love. Everybody is worthy of love, but we find reasons to disqualify ourselves because that's the mean thing that humans do to ourselves um, in this world. But taking things personally is just an opportunity to see where I have been in caught up in some lie about myself and maybe other people.
Yeah, and I think it actually gets back to that issue of being in control, because if somebody communicates to me that I'm not okay in some way, like I don't want to date you anymore, for example, that why? Well, it must be because fill in the blank, right? And so we tell ourselves these stories, and we take it personally, like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm the wrong shape or size or color or whatever. I
right.
don't do the right things. I laugh too loud, right?
Right. When
Yeah.
actually that was what we believed about ourselves deep down all along. And the trigger of a breakup or whatever it is allowed that an opportunity to come out, which is why I teach self love as the foundation. Because if you don't address the foundational need for a healthy relationship with yourself, inevitably, when the next trigger comes up, when the next challenge comes up, when the next breakup, rejection, put a rejection in air quotes because it's
Yeah.
never really rejection. But and when the next trigger of any sort comes up, you will crumble. I used to crumble. I've seen it happen to so many people. We let these things stop us because we might be feeling like fine and good one day, but then, a relationship doesn't work out or something happens, a disappointment of some sort happens. And that's when we're like, oh, okay, now I see I still don't have a healthy enough relationship with myself to bear the disappointment of this relationship not working out, of being interested in this person who's not interested in me, whatever the story might be. If we do not have a foundation of self love, that's going to knock us off of our feet and we'll never get up and go out and date again for another year or two or whatever it is. We're wasting time because we can't handle it. And also, until we learn to handle that, we can't sustain the stressors of a relationship anyway, because we have to be, again, like I said early on, it's not just about survival. Self-love is a foundation for being able to have a healthy relationship with other people, so that I'm not pulling on you for something that I should be doing for myself, or running from you because I don't believe you can give it to me, whatever this pattern may be in a given
Mhm,
person.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
It's necessary to create that foundation so that we can learn how to healthily withstand the inevitable disappointments of life, the inevitable pains of life. Because there's certain things that won't go away. There's the stories that we create, the wounded stories that we create, and then there's just shit happens, And then there's just
Right.
the life is going to throw you some curveballs.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
how do
yeah.
we handle it when that do we make it into a wounded story, or do we learn how to like actually like love ourselves?
So, how do you start down this journey? How do you start to love yourself and address these patterns of emotional pain? It seems all kind of overwhelming and like a big chore. So,
Oh,
or
absolutely.
yeah. So where do you start?
My personal experience is that when you lack self-love to the degree that a lot of people do, it's incredibly difficult to do it on your own. And I honestly don't believe that we're meant to do it alone. That's not to say that you have to hire a coach or a therapist or somebody to work with you through it, but I do believe that it is incomparably helpful to do so, because it's hard to stick with it and to have the insight into it and to stay consistent in the actions without the support of another person. And we can do this with friends and people who love us as well, and with books and things like that's entirely possible. But to have somebody who's skilled at that particular thing, and particularly with self-love, that was one thing. I had therapists and coaches and did personal development for a gazillion years, but until I specifically worked on the self-love piece, how I was relating to myself in a very intentional way, every day, that nothing else was really going to quote work for the things I was trying to create in my life. So I was always going to sabotage it. And that's what I've seen again with people, no matter what they're trying to create in their lives. There's something about the lack of self-love is going to prevent it until they actually address the self-love piece. And it's hard to do without the self-love to have the insight of love. Love is a whole different consciousness level. Love is an entirely different consciousness level. When you are in a baseline lack of self love with yourself, you do not have the level of insight into what love would really do. Most of us don't really have examples of what true, healthy love behaves like, and what kind of permission it gives us, and what kind of responsibility it calls forth from us. Most of us have no examples of that. So to have the support to do that and to hold you to it is really um, the most valuable thing in my view. Um, Short of that, I just really do believe that we have this habit in our culture of lone wolfing things and thinking that we're supposed to be able to figure it all out alone. Or, one manifestation of lack of self worth that I used to have was not wanting to spend money on myself. So I didn't want to spend money for help. I wanted to just figure it out in a book, or like wanted to study what I was interested in without like focusing on myself too much, whatever it might be. Like I got really great at astrology and stuff in certain ways without having to look at my deeper issues in a way that was really like, we're going to heal this now. We're going to heal this now. I could see it on paper. I could understand that I had self-worth problems, but to actually like go in and address it was not something I was going to manage to do for myself. So it took the initial act of self-love, of choosing to hire the support for myself that I needed. And then I think that so that by itself is a powerful act of self-love, to
Yeah.
invest in ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't say this so that people hire you or me or anybody in particular, but just so that you know that realistically, that's how it goes. If you can hire the best help you can afford, that's really what's going to accelerate your progress enormously. But also, we are just not meant to be alone. Like, this is
Right.
a natural and normal desire. The desire that the people watching this have for love and partnership is divine. Like, that is part of like how we're meant to be here. That's that's something we're driven to by our very natures. Our nature is to love and to have intimacy and to be known and to be supported and to know and support others deeply. That is how we are made to thrive. When we think of the sweetest moments in our lives, some of them may be alone, but in very many cases, it's because we're with people that we love immensely, and having special moments with people that we love immensely. And it's likewise, like, growing in self love is not something we can do outside the context of love. So, especially to have somebody supportive, a coach or a therapist who can love you through the process,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that is powerful. That
Yeah.
is powerful too, to be in the field of love while you are growing in that ability to love yourself can really open up a lot of space for healing as well. So it's huge. I really don't believe that we're meant to just figure out how to love in isolation. It just doesn't even make sense. I mean,
No.
because in a relationship, we do have a relationship with ourselves
Yeah.
as much as with other people, and we need to heal that, but we're not meant to just like sort it out
Well,
off
you
by
can't
ourselves.
read about it. I think it's the difference between reading about it and experiencing it. And if you have a relationship with somebody where you can experience that love and be in that field of love, then
Yes.
you can explore it and figure out what it means for you, and
Yes.
then carry it forward into other relationships because now you have it.
Absolutely. Well, that's one thing I tell my clients. I tell them, like, early on, I'm like, this is going to trigger you sometimes. There'll be times when you'll be mad at me. It's an opportunity for us to actually work out the stuff that's coming up, which isn't to say that I'm not like also human and don't also have stuff to like, own sometimes with people, because I'm still a person. So it's not saying that like always everything that's going on with them is because it's their trigger or whatever, but they will be triggered. And it's because the problems that you're experiencing in seeking partnership are actually patterns that exist in all of your relationships. They just come through loud and clear when we're trying to create partnership in particular.
Yes.
So the patterns of how I'm showing up with partnership are also patterns of how I'm showing up with friendship, with family, with myself. And it goes in many different ways. So you actually create an opportunity in that professional relationship, with somebody who's coming in with love and the skills and the wisdom, to guide you, to actually work those things out with them in ways, and say what your needs are. For example, say how you felt, what happened that made you feel a certain way, and work that out, and also learn that it can be safe to do so.
Yeah.
Hey, it can be safe to do so. And it can be not only safe, but it can deepen intimacy. I love to tell people that I never really know I'm friends with somebody until we've had a fight or two.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I tell my clients, like, you can fall in love with somebody until you've had a fight. You don't know how this relationship's going to go,
Truth,
because that
truth.
how you manage the conflict is really the test of the relationship, and the health of the relationship.
So wise. That's so true. Really good for you to like share with them. I love that you say that. Because
Yeah.
that's like don't commit to anything until you've had a conflict. Brilliant advice.
Right. Which is weird because, who wants to fight?
Right.
Like,
People avoid it. We think that it means danger when in fact it means an opportunity for intimacy. It's an
yeah.
opportunity. Conflict is an opportunity, and you might actually come out closer on the other side if this person is somebody you even want to be with. If
Yeah.
the person is somebody you actually want to be with, it is possible for that conflict to create an even deeper relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because you become vulnerable in the exploration of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The fear that you feel is actually a part of the process, because you're learning to be safe with your fear with this other person. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can be messy sometimes, I can get it wrong, I can still be loved. Wow.
That's
Wow.
amazing. Like, and we would
Yeah.
all just love to be there. That unconditional positive regard, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. This has been such an awesome conversation with you about self-love. You are throwing in a bonus for participants who buy the all access pass to the summit. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yes, I'm doing a video training that basically it's going to be a quick training to help people connect with their vision and the power of their vision for their life. But also, there's this kind of hack that came through. I think it was divinely inspired, honestly, and it was very powerful when I first tested it with people. That's basically to liberate some of the energy. It's to introduce you to the emotional journey that you are facing between where you are right now and the vision for what you're creating in partnership in the rest of your life, and to anticipate the nature of it so that you don't think that, oh crap, this means I'm on the wrong path or I'm getting it wrong, but so that you understand the nature of the journey. And then there's this beautiful piece in it where I'm not going to reveal it because part of the power is in the exercise, but so that you understand it's going to liberate some energy on the path. We'll just put
Yeah,
it that way.
nice, nice.
It will free up some energy to inspire that the capacity to handle the emotional journey that you're going to be on there. And if you're realistic about, this journey that we're on, it's not an easy path to create something that's never been created before, to manifest the relationship of our dreams and things like that. It's going to bring up all your stuff. It's not a walk in the park, but it's a beautiful exercise to bring you into the realization that you can handle it, and
Yeah, yeah.
and to encourage you to keep moving forward. It's a lovely thing. I hope people will experience it.
I think it's important for people to understand that they can handle it. Like this is
Yes,
doable.
yes,
Um,
this is doable.
yeah.
So hopefully this will bring an embodied experience of the fact that this is doable and you're on the right path. So, just keep
Keep
going.
going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Where can people find you?
My website is karlita.org, Karlita with a K, and it's KARLITA.org. And you can get on my emailing list there, and join in my own. I love doing events like this as well.
Yeah.
I love interviewing people. Who knew if you just like created a platform, you get to interview all kinds of amazing people and make new friends and like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so much fun.
It's so much
So
fun. It is. It is.
it's so much fun. It's so much fun.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today and having fun with us today.
My
And
pleasure, my friend. Thank you so
yes,
much.
you take care.